Greetings and welcome to For the Love of Lit, Inspiring Young Authors. My name is Laura Bradley and I'm a middle school teacher in Petaluma, California. I teach 8th grade English, plus Design Lab and broadcast media. Thanks so much for joining us for this very special event brought to you by PBS and the Great American Read, and with lots of help from NaNoWriMo, also known as National Novel Writing Month. We're excited to have special guest Chris Baty joining us. Chris says he's the accidental founder of NaNoWriMo, and he'll be sharing his novel writing expertise throughout our show. And my co-moderator tonight is Heather Gauck. Introduce yourself, Heather.
Thanks, Laura. I'm Heather Gauck, and I have taught special education in grades K through 4 in Michigan for over 20 years. I'm excited to be here and dive into the topic of fostering a love of writing, even with students who find this task frustrating and overwhelming. I want to let you all know that you don't need to take notes during the show. You will see a bit.ly link on our slides, which will take you to a doc that is full of resources that you might find useful for inspiring your students to be authors and critical readers. Also, throughout the conversation, we will be integrating the questions you submit through the chat box on the side of your screen into this conversation. Our event organizers will be keeping an eye on the chat box and are happy to help answer technical questions you have along the way.
Thanks, Heather. Before we get started, I want to offer some quick tips to help you participate in the event. As you can see on your screen, there are several interactive tools you can use throughout our discussion, including the emojis below that allow you to share how you're feeling about what you're viewing. On the side of the screen, you'll see our chat box that allows you to introduce yourself, post comments, and submit questions for us. Throughout the event, we will share resources that we're discussing, and we'll do our best to integrate questions you submit into our conversation. You can test out the chat box now by telling us where you're tuning in from.
This event will take place over the course of the next hour. If you encounter any technical issues, please reach out to ov@itvs.org. We'll post that email address in the chat box. For the best viewing experience, we recommend you connect your computer to a hardwired internet connection and use the Chrome browser. If you have issues viewing, try refreshing your screen. It's okay if you're on Wi-Fi, but you may experience some delays during our clips.
It's great seeing all of you here from all over the country. I see people from Canada, Kentucky, Grand Rapids, Delaware, Pennsylvania. How about we dive in? Welcome to the show, Chris Baty, the accidental founder of National Novel Writing Month. Chris oversaw the event's growth from 21 friends to more than 300,000 writers in 90 countries. Chris now serves as a board member emeritus for NaNoWriMo and spends his days teaching classes at Stanford University's Writers Studio, helping Dropbox with word wrangling, and endlessly revising his own novels. He's the author of No Plot, No Problem, and the co-author of Ready, Set, Novel. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, Heather.
Hi.
Tonight we'll be talking about how we can build our students' narrative reading skills when we also build their narrative writing skills. It seems obvious that the best way to improve reading is to have students read, but it turns out that if we ask our students to write stories, they will become better readers of stories. And we often make the mistake of thinking we will intimidate our students if we ask them to write long pieces. But the truth is, if we challenge them to write a novel, yes, a novel, they will become much more critical and analytical readers of novels. Welcome to our discussion on how the NaNoWriMo challenge of writing a novel in a month will inspire your students as writers while also engaging them as readers, and how you can use mentor texts from the Great American Read to inspire your young authors. So Chris, which books from the Great American Read have inspired you as a writer?
Oh man, there are so many great books on that list. I think, to me, I always love reading and writing stories that have a kind of mix of humor and humanity that kind of make you laugh, and then kind of also contain some deeper truths about human existence. To me, I think the two books and authors that I really loved on that list, one was The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. Oh, so good. Also so stylistically playful. Like, he puts an entire page of prime number charts in the book, which I just feel like anytime you can get math formulas in a novel, you're already ahead of things. And then the other, one of my ultimate favorite writers when I was just kind of starting to write as a teenager was Kurt Vonnegut. So seeing Sirens of Titan on there really warmed my heart, and he's been such an influence on me as well.
That's great. It's hard to vote for just one, isn't it?
Right?
Really hard. So recently we've seen an increased focus on expository and argument writing, which are of course important genres for our students to master, but we should not let narrative writing get pushed to the side. When our kids write narratives, they find and develop their voice, they tap into and build their creativity. The writing skills they develop will transfer to other types of writing. Narrative is a powerful genre worthy of study. Just listen to these student authors talk about their narratives.
Hi, my name is Ariana. I'm in 8th grade and I'm writing a book about a corrupt government that went too far.
I'm Wally and I'm writing a book about a kid with supernatural abilities.
I'm writing a novel about a girl getting sucked into an alternate universe.
My book is about trying to escape an island.
People trying to figure out what happened to their very healthy, yet for some reason dying father.
I'm Caitlin, and I wrote my first novel, Neglected Heroes, when I was in the 8th grade.
When I think of a novel, I think about a pretty fat book, and writing that much seems pretty impossible.
Especially when my teacher first said it, she was just like, "You're gonna write a book." And I was like, "What?"
I also felt super freaked out because I had no idea what I was gonna do.
I was convinced that it was only something that adults were allowed to do.
The biggest challenge was setting up all the characters and then getting the setting.
And to take that feedback and to turn it into something better.
I think the most exciting part about writing this novel in 30 days is that I never thought I'd do it.
It is possible to write a book in just 1 month.
When I published my novel, I felt invincible.
Well, now impossible just seems so much more reachable.
Don't give up.
Everyone has a story.
Well, the ending of my story is gonna be the main character's friends die. Yeah.
And then they're gonna defeat the bad guy at the end.
So that was a wonderful video. But we also must keep in mind our students who struggle with writing. So many of our students have such wonderful ideas, but due to spelling and writing difficulties, often do not get the chance to engage in narrative writing. How can we still support their storytelling abilities with the implementation of technology?
That's a great point, Heather. Can you tell us more about how you've used technology to help your students with their writing?
Yeah, one of the tools I have found helps the most with these difficulties has been the use of Google Voice typing. It is found in this tools section when creating a Google Doc. I have found this to be more accurate than some of the previous voice-to-text tools I have used in the past. I also have found that it does a fairly good job understanding some of my students who have speech articulation deficits. In order to do this in a large classroom with many students, I have set up a recording spot where there is a set of headphones with a microphone attached that students may use to block out background noises.
That's a great suggestion. I know my kids would love that, especially the recording studio. That would be very cool. Yeah. Okay, here's a question for our audience. What are ways that you've incorporated technology to help your students with their writing? How do you feel about that, bringing in technology and using that for writing? Use the emojis to share your feelings about technology in the writing classroom. I know that the first year I challenged students to NaNoWriMo, I was so afraid they wouldn't have ideas for stories. But after just one class period of letting them brainstorm ideas with their friends, I discovered that not only did they have stories to tell, but they were far more imaginative and creative than I have ever been as a writer. Just take a look at what some of my students said. You can see that their ideas come from their own lives, from stories they see on the news. from serious issues that concern them, and of course from books that they've read. It was a big leap of faith to trust my kids to have stories, but they really do. So now let's look at how we can help our students turn their ideas into writing. There are great resources from NaNoWriMo that help students plot their novels. And these workbooks are available free. You can download the PDF, pick the one for your grade level, totally free. I've also found the hero's journey to be a great outline resource for my students. When they see the hero's journey reflected in so many stories that they have read, then they're able to use those mentor texts and plan their own plots. Take a look at this great video that shows all these familiar stories within that outline of the hero's journey.
This is the Hollywood Guidebook for Heroes. You will learn the secret truth behind most blockbuster movies. They basically all follow the same 12 steps, also known as the hero's journey. Every hero's story starts off with some sort of nobody living in an ordinary world. But by following the White Rabbit, he will get the call to adventure. At first, he can't be too eager. He must refuse the call. Running away from his destiny, he will stumble upon a mysterious old guy who will turn out to be his mentor. Now he's ready to cross the threshold. Where he's going, he doesn't need roads. Of course, he will be tested, and he might need to win the game to gain new allies and enemies. He must overcome his fear by entering the inmost cave. Here, he will face his supreme ordeal, which will change his life forever. After defeating some bad guy, he'll receive his well-deserved reward. And because he can, he will be flying the road back. But before realizing there's no place like home, our apprentice must resurrect as a new person. Eventually, our hero will return to where he started, but things will never be the same again. This is what we call the hero's journey.
Chris, how about you? Do you use an outline to plot your novels? Are you a plotter or a pantser? And for those unfamiliar with NaNoWriMo lingo, could you explain plotter and pantser?
Sure. So a plotter is somebody who likes to spend, a lengthy amount of time thinking through what their story will be, who their characters are, maybe who their character's family is. A pantser is somebody who writes by the seat of their pants. So this is somebody that just prefers to kind of just dive in and see where the story takes them. I think this will be my 20th time moving through the NaNoWriMo adventure this fall. So I have both plotted and pantsed. For me, I have sort of come down, I've discovered that knowing a little bit about who the character is and then asking just a handful of questions is super helpful for me in starting to get the book going. And so to me, I like to know for the character what's missing from their current life. So, a great example is, the first Harry Potter book. Here is this poor kid basically living underneath the stairs, is missing his family. So that seems to be the thing, is that sense of connection. And then I like to think what could be a problem or opportunity that presents itself. Again, this is very classic hero's journey. For our young friend Harry, it was Owl Post, and now there's this invitation to join this magical wizarding world. And then I think that the other thing I love to know about is, like, what are the stakes involved if if the main character succeeds or if they fail in kind of realizing this opportunity or solving this problem. Again, for Harry Potter, like, this is pretty huge. It's like, is he going to become the wizard he was always meant to be and avenge the death of his parents and, you know, save the world? And I think lastly, what I love to think about as I sort of start to brainstorm this before writing is just, you know, thinking about, could they get what they need, but not what they want? So again, I think that's such a satisfying ending, is this notion that for Harry Potter, through most of the books, he's not defeating Voldemort. You know, he's not becoming this all-powerful wizard and not realizing his total potential. But the thing that he does get at the end of that first book is a family and a sense of belonging again. And I think those are the ones that kind of give us chills as readers. And that's such a great thing, I think, when you're just thinking about your book. If you can look at those 4 questions, I think that usually will get you started on a great story arc.
I am taking that, not what you want, but what you need, back to my kids tomorrow. That's great. That's great.
So with my students, because I am working with, you know, younger kids, and then also I'm a special ed teacher, sometimes they stop even before they even begin when I say, we're going to write stories. One strategy I have tried is to have students storyboard their ideas first. And so with very simple sketches, just to get them started. I also have used virtual reality to sort of jumpstart their brainstorming. And I have some coloring pages that actually come to life after they have colored it. So I've used that to say, okay, we're going to, you know, start putting some things down on paper, and then you get to color this and make it come to life, and then we can really try to brainstorm that way. Or I've also started using some virtual reality for virtual field trips. So they start writing, and then I bring them on a virtual field trip through my cell phone, like to Africa or something. So a lot of my students also don't have experiences. I'm in an urban setting, and so they're very limited. So I also at times scribe their ideas, and then they type it up. So what I have written down for them. And there are also apps that use predictive spelling tools that the words will pop up for them to pick instead of having to spell, because that's such a, you know, a struggle for them.
Those are fantastic ideas. Talk about taking technology and turning it into this vision of their story. What a big difference that would make. And that's not just special ed. That's something that any writer would love to be able to do, especially finding those new settings beyond what you know. Those are great. I've also found that if I let students work with a friend or two, that they're better able to share their ideas and get more ideas for their story. It's really scary to share these things out loud. So if I let them sit where they want, then they can be with people that they feel safe with. And so that community becomes important for us. Chris, isn't that something that's kind of central to NaNoWriMo? Do you have a group of trusted friends that you go to for writing help?
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the real revelations for me this first year that we did this, is that it really kind of takes a village to write a novel. And I think part of that is just because we're usually juggling so many other things in the middle of our lives. For students, it's a busy school, family, sports, social lives. I think whatever's going on, it can be hard to make writing the focus and priority. And that's where I think friends and other kind of writing buddies can really build accountability. I love going on plot walks with friends, both before NaNoWriMo, during November as well. I think sometimes we just sort of write ourselves into a corner, which can make our stories really exciting for future readers, but we actually don't know how to get out of them. So I find that friends are indispensable in giving us that solution, finding those really juicy complications, but helping us get out of them again.
Yeah, that's great. And you don't usually have sort of competition type stuff in English class, but I love how the word count makes it competitive, and the kids will compare, like, how far did you get today? And so that's a lot of fun too. So now let's look at how books from the Great American Read can support our students as writers as well as readers. There are so many great books here that can be referenced when we're helping our students develop their stories. For instance, last month, my students were planning settings for their stories. So we looked at settings in different books, and really focused on how the setting can affect the character and can affect the story. I wanted them to see that their protagonist needs to be put into situations where they are safe and confident, like Ponyboy in his own home, as well as placed in settings where they're unsure, even afraid, like when Harry Potter first moved to Hogwarts. We looked at how does the setting of a small plane affect Brian and Hatchet? How did Katniss feel when she went hunting in the woods compared to how she felt when she was in the arena? These mentor texts really help our students see how the different pieces of a narrative come together to create the full story. So by connecting the stories they had read to the stories they're writing, my students started to grasp one of the most difficult reading standards, which is literary analysis. They have to go beyond comprehension. 8th graders now are expected to analyze what they read, analyze themes, dialogue, character development, point of view. Literary analysis is a focus of my English classroom, but it's always a struggle. After my students wrote their own novels, they started to engage in literary analysis totally on their own. Attempting to write a novel turned them into critical and analytical readers of novels. So I just have a couple of quotes from students. I just asked them what they noticed about their reading. And I think you can see that they're using language that we want them to use in analysis of literature, but that they don't usually find unless they actually try to write it themselves. So it turned out to be pretty powerful impact on their reading, not just their writing. So Chris, have you noticed this? Did you notice a change in your reading when you first started writing a novel?
I did. And, you know, I have been in love with books. I'm an only child, and books were kind of my siblings growing up. And I've been just in love and constantly in the throes of books since I was very young. And I think they felt like these perfect, impeccable, you know, otherworldly objects that were beamed down from, you know, Planet Novel or something. And I think that writing my own books really helped me see both like a deeper beauty in them, but also start to be able to kind of see the seams and the way that they were constructed. And, you know, after I did National Novel Writing Month, I remember reading Michael Chabon's The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, which is it's a great yarn, and what a wonderful story. But there's this moment when there's this huge break in the action, and we go from this very intense set of characters, and suddenly one of the characters is out in the Arctic somewhere at some ice station, and I'm like, I know what happened to you, Michael Chabon. You totally ran out of ideas, and you're like, I'm just gonna wildly change. I'm gonna change venue here. And I really just kind of loved, I think, being able to start to think about like, oh, what were the writerly decisions that before had always just been invisible to me.
Yes. And writerly decisions is a phrase that I've used as well, that I think that when my students are working on the same piece of writing for weeks at a time, that's when they really begin to notice writerly decisions, and that doesn't happen as much with shorter pieces.
I think that's true. And I think the other thing that to me, again, like it's not just a disillusioning activity. Like, I do think it's exciting to be able to know how things are built and start to see patterns, but it also is such a testament to the power of these stories that even once we know, okay, for instance, in every movie, 2/3 of the way through, there will be an all is lost moment. It will be the long, dark night of the soul. You know that when it's happening, you are still moved by it. And, you know, so to me, that was even more of a testament to the power of stories and the joy of writing them.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So another way we can help our students become more analytical readers is by showing them complex characters in mentor texts and then having them develop their own complex characters for their novels. My students love that scene from the movie Shrek when he tries to explain to Donkey that ogres are not simplistic bad creatures, but that they have layers like onions. And that scene inspired my students to create characters that have layers, just like real people who present one layer to the public, but tend to hide inner layers to protect ourselves. And of course, Snape from Harry Potter is a great example of a complex, layered character who appeared at first to just be terribly mean and unfair to Harry. But as the story unfolds, we discover that he's one of the more complex and compelling characters in the series. Heather, what characters would your students recognize as having layers?
A series that I love to use with my students is Chronicles of Narnia. The characters change from being young children playing in a wardrobe to then landing in a magical land where they have to dig deep to figure out how to survive against evil and ultimately become kings and queens. I also like how, as you go deeper into the series, the issue of growing up and no longer experiencing the magic of Narnia, as characters change and grow, how that develops. Another thing that really stands out in these books for me is the vocabulary. The vocabulary of these books, although much higher than the vocabulary of my students, really gave them great exposure to these words. And I just loved, even as I was doing read alouds, and exposing them to these words and showing them that they too can, read these big vocabulary words and really enjoy a story.
That's great. I love when we connect these great books to our writing. I just feel like it's like a win-win-win. It just keeps circling back around between their writing and their reading, and it all just keeps, I guess, like layers of an onion. So I just want to let our audience know that we're running a little bit ahead of schedule. Hooray. And so we're going to have time at the end for questions. So if you just want to be thinking about planning ahead questions that you want to ask, I think we'll save them to the end, so that just in case we address one of your questions before we get there. So we can't talk about writing without addressing the elephant in the room, which is writer's block. We know our students are going to get stuck once in a while, and we need to plan ahead with strategies to help them get unstuck. And actually, when my students are writing on their novels, I don't allow any talking because it just is too distracting. And so there's a lot of front loading in the beginning to make sure that they will be able to get unstuck. So one of my students' favorite resources is the Dare Machine on the NaNoWriMo website. And the Dare Machine will dare you to add something crazy to your story. And the kids will use the Dare Machine and they'll say, well, that doesn't make sense in my story. That won't help at all. But they've learned that if they write a scene using the Dare, even if it doesn't make sense, it will usually generate some more ideas. But if they don't like the first Dare they get, they just click show me another until they come up with one that they really like. And another strategy that they really enjoy using is pep talks that come from published authors. The NaNoWriMo website is filled with them, and when the students sign up on the site, they get an email each week that includes a pep talk. And these are all authors' books in our library, so we talk about these writers all the time. And another piece of this is that it shows my students that they are part of a huge writing community, and all of a sudden, writing doesn't look like a class assignment anymore. It looks like something that grown-ups do, and crazy people who work other jobs choose to do it on their own, even though they don't have any time. And so the community just gets bigger and bigger, and that's really special for the kids. So Chris, what do you do when you get, now I've heard that there is no writer's block because a doctor can't have doctor's block. Like, you just can't have a block, but we say that and we do run out of ideas. So what do you do?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just to understand that this is super common. I think part of the thing that starts to get us really nervous feeling and sort of compounds this feeling of I don't have any ideas or I shouldn't be doing this is that feeling that it's just us that this is happening to. And I think just understanding that, you know, every author that we've loved and every book that's inspired us kind of walked the same series of ups and downs of feeling like, oh, this is a disaster. This is so embarrassing. I have no business being a writer. And these are professional writers who feel this. And that's, I think, been one of the heartening things in kind of talking to a lot of novelists over the years is just knowing that those moments of self-doubt are real, and that also the first draft of anything is going to kind of be a mix of like wonderful, beautiful, unexpected moments, but also just some difficult times where you're kind of reaching and trying to find connections that maybe aren't necessarily feeling like they're there. But I think one of the things that I really believe around writer's block is that I think the difference between a book that you feel absolutely despondent and miserable about and one that you're really excited about writing is often just, the difference is often an hour of good solid writing. So when I'm feeling that way, and I do feel that way, is I just usually break it down into quantity. I say I'm going to write 500 words. They may be terrible words. It may be just a super long dream sequence. Dream sequences are free. That's basically a pile of words that you can dig into. Or it could be that the character starts looking and finds something on the bottom of their shoe, and I'm just going to hang out there with that thing on the bottom of their shoe for 500 words. Because like you said, I think you often end up, as you start writing, that thing is like, oh, actually that's a clue, and that's a clue to this mystery that they were trying to solve, and it's been stuck to their shoe. So I really find that writing sort of momentum really begets momentum. Another thing that I really have found is helpful is just rote activities. So for students, this can be kind of hard because, you know, they are in the classroom environment, but things I found just like riding a bike or taking a shower, washing dishes can be just anytime when your body is just kind of in these routine motions and they free up your brain, I think can be very powerful for finding connections. But I also do love randomness. So the Dare Machine is a great example. Sometimes I will just grab a novel off the shelf, I will close my eyes, I'll flip it open, and I'll put my finger on a line without looking, and I'll open my eyes. And whatever that line is from that novel, I will include as the next line in my novel. And I find that to be just a wonderful unblocker because, like you said, it just gets your imagination going in different ways.
I'm totally stealing that. That's so good. One of our favorite strategies is to write a flashback scene.
Yes.
I tell the kids, you know, your character is 16 years old and you run out of stuff. Go, you know, to put a scene from when they were 8 so that we can learn more about their childhood. And it's really cool because then they realize, oh, that's right. Whatever happened when they were 8 maybe affected who they are now. And I should include that.
Right. I think another thing that is so great is physical objects. So, you know, a lot of times there will be things that are surrounding our characters that they're in the room with that they, you know, are kind of just in the background. But I think moving those into the foreground for a little bit can actually sort of, again, unlock potential where maybe this is a talisman or an amulet, or it turns out that this is something very important. So whether it's on the bottom of their shoe or hanging out in the room with them, I think looking at the physical space around a character can be a great way to get back on track.
Yeah, cool. Okay, now we're going to look at a really valuable but often overlooked piece of the writing process, and that's giving our students opportunities to publish their work. And we don't have to wait until they're finished with their stories to publish them. We like to share just excerpts. I have them pick their most brilliant line out of their story, and we put it on colored paper and put it on the bulletin board. Sometimes publishing just means having them read aloud the best few sentences that they wrote that day. I also have them revise excerpts, and they put them on their digital portfolios, which they're then able to share with their classmates and with their families and things like that. But thanks to all the cool programs out there, our kids can also publish stories in hardbound books. For elementary students, Student Treasures is a really great program where students can illustrate with drawings and also put in the text to publish hardbound books. And the last we used it, it was free. Each student got a free copy of their book. They're counting on Grandma and Grandpa to order some. And for students, my junior high students, some of them use CreateSpace, which is a free publishing site owned by Amazon. And so that means that some of their novels are available on Amazon, which is pretty exciting for them. And then we buy those books and we put them in our classroom libraries so that the future students can see what they can do with NaNoWriMo. What does that look like for you, Heather?
Let's see. So one fun way we have shared our work is to do a museum walk in the hallway. We posted finished products on lockers and then attached QR codes or Erasmus triggers to the work of the author explaining their own work. And we then allowed peers to use devices with headphones to walk down the hall and to hear the author's explanation.
That's so cool. I should be taking notes. I'm glad we have a resource doc because I'm not taking notes. Another form of publishing is to give students a live audience for their work. And we're lucky that we have a great local bookstore that hosts an author event for our kids. They prepare an excerpt, they write an introduction to it to let the audience know a little bit about their story. And then we spread it out over a few evenings so that we don't have 100 kids all at once. And they invite their friends and family. But there are also author events in coffee shops, or just the school itself could host a read aloud at some point. And then when NaNoWriMo ends, technically that's November 30th, there are lots of really cool ways that we like to extend the narrative study beyond their novels. And the first thing that I tell them is we're just going to put away our stories and we're not going to look at them for a while. And the coolest part about that is when they do look at it again, they can't even remember that they wrote all that. They're just blown away. But the first week of December is Computer Science Education Week, and that's also the Hour of Code. And so I have my students use the Scratch program, and they design and code a computer game based on the novel that they wrote. And one of the really cool things about that is that their novel is long and complex, and a computer game that they code is going to be much simpler. And so they have to decide what will be the scene and the obstacles and the plot line of that game that they make. And it's really cool for them to discover that all those games they play are narratives. And I think that really helps them to understand narrative even more.
I also have used coding to motivate my students who are resistant to writing. One student in particular spent a few weeks storyboarding, preparing props, and then coding a dash and dot robot to act out a story that she created. It was great fun, and then she put it together in a video. We dropped it all into iMovie, and then we shared it out through her Seesaw digital portfolio. So, you know, that takes a little bit more time, but it was so creative, and it was just a way to get her to get over that resistance to writing.
I have sure learned that the projects that take more time are the ones the kids will always remember. Yeah. And so it really allows them to go deep instead of just a shallow study. We also enjoy making movie trailers of our stories, and I've really learned that it's much better if they make a movie trailer of their own book instead of someone else's, because they can always find images online for someone else's book, but not for their own. So they have to create it themselves. They've done that with iMovie, but they also have done it with Google Slides and with Prezi. They design their own book covers, including an author picture and reviews of the book and all of that. I think the scariest thing about challenging students like this is that we worry that they won't know what to write. But when they have support, when they have opportunities to share their writing, honestly, your kids are going to amaze you. This really is a powerful project. I would like us to turn to some questions. And I want to start with one that I think is probably the most common for teachers, and that is the time commitment that we have for NaNoWriMo, and how do we do that with standards, how much time per day. So the first thing that you need to know is that the wonderful people at NaNoWriMo have created curriculum and workbooks, and all of it is linked to the Common Core standards. So when you think about what students need to do as writers, as far as narrative writing goes, it is all and more in NaNoWriMo. If you need to convince an administrator or a school board, the NaNoWriMo curriculum has all of that information in there. And now, when we look at it related to reading, you can see it also addresses a lot of reading standards as well. It is a huge, huge project that ties in so many more standards than you would expect. My English classes meet every other day. So I only see them every other day. And we spend September and October in all of the preparation for writing their novels. And the best part of that is that they are itching to write. They are begging to write, and that doesn't usually happen. And I always say, you can't write until NaNoWriMo starts. And so all that preparation gets them really excited. But because we have a 90-minute block, there's time for mini lessons, there's time for grammar review, for those kinds of things, which I think really only work in small chunks anyway. I wouldn't want to devote a whole lot of time to that. And some teachers at our school don't spend as much time on NaNoWriMo, and some spend more. I just discovered that it addresses so much, and so we spend a lot of time on that. Heather, did you want to talk a little bit about the virtual reality?
Sure. Yeah, I know that there was a question about that virtual reality app. What I use is it's Discovery VR, so it's a free one, and it's by Discovery, the Discovery Channel. And there's a lot of apps out there. I've tried a couple, but it seems like the Discovery one is pretty good. You do need good Wi-Fi. So I was actually just trying to get one of my very resistant students to do some writing, and I got him to write a couple of sentences about a ghost because we were going to do a ghost story one, and then it didn't work. Oh no. But that was okay because he was like, well, this is a preview because it was working and it was buffering. And so he goes, this will just be my preview. So that was good. So when we get better data, better Wi-Fi, then we'll be able to use it. But it is just an app that I use on my phone, my own phone. And then I had purchased some plastic, like virtual reality goggles at like the mall in a clothes store, like for $15 or something like that around Christmas time. And so I know that there's also some cardboard, like Google Cardboard. I know that you can also make them yourself, but it seems like it's become more, more accessible. So it's those little goggles and you just stick your phone right in there, and it brings them straight to the animals. There's sharks and also, just all sorts of awesome things. So that's the Discovery app. And then there was another app that I use. It's called Write About. And it is an app that costs maybe about $3.99, but it has a lot of prompts for different levels. It's more elementary, but it has some audio support. It also, when the kids write, they can read what they wrote themselves, because sometimes my students write and I have no idea what they are trying to write. But that is a really great app, and that has the predictive words that pop up in it. And that's only like a $3.99 app, rather than there's some things out there that you have to, pay monthly fees.
Okay. Great. I'm going to grab a question that's near and dear to my heart, and that is, how do we encourage pleasure reading, especially at the high school level, middle school, with teenagers who we might think they're at an age where they won't enjoy it. So in my early years of teaching, I used to think that if the parents didn't establish reading for pleasure at home, that as a teacher, I wouldn't be able to change that. And then I found out that I could, and it was very exciting. And it's pretty simple, I think. The first step is we start every single class period with story time, and 8th graders are not too old for story time, and neither are high school kids. It used to be that I was not able to recommend books to my students because I wasn't reading enough YA literature. And then I started doing story time, and I started building a class library using Scholastic. So the books are all free. If my kids order books, I get free books. But story time in my class every day is a different book. And so every day I choose a really compelling excerpt from a really great book, and I sometimes give a little background if I need to, and I read it aloud, and the kids don't want me to stop, and then I put it on the tray of the whiteboard, and we keep a running list, and we call it Really Good Books to Read Someday, because that's what readers do. They've always got a stack. And so it just becomes a routine, and within a couple of weeks, we are talking authors and genres and plots and characters as if we all had read all the books. So that was the first change that I made. And then the second one was that we start every class with silent reading first, and then story time. And so story time is a way to help kids find good books to read, but then we have to give them time in class to read any book that they want to read without testing them on it, without having a whole lot of accountability. Just what's the great book that you're reading, and then that's the accountability as they talk about it with their friends, and they write about it on their blog, and they post things on their portfolio about the book they're reading. So most powerful change I've ever seen is with story time and then silent reading in class. And then there's also a question for to make writing a novel more attainable for students who struggle. So we didn't mention that the Young Writers Program of NaNoWriMo has set it up so that it really is differentiated. So the teacher decides what will be the length, the minimum length for these stories based on word count. And then the students choose their word goal with teacher guidance. And so, for instance, my 8th graders this year have a minimum goal of 10,000, and we do some free writing to get a sense. Most of them don't know what 500 words looks like. And so we do some journaling and checking our word count and do a little bit of math of calculating if I write this many class days and this many homework days, what would be a sensible goal. And then the students set their own goals. And so when we say novel, it's shorter than a novel, but it usually is enough that it can actually be published and it looks like a book that they would see in a library, just much shorter. So the novel part of it, for me, feels like this is how we're giving them this huge, scary goal with support that will feel like a huge accomplishment. And no matter what their goal is, it's far more writing than they've ever done for any other class. Okay, so writer's workshop model. Let's see, someone asked if we've tried incorporating peer review into your process. So we use Google Docs, and that's actually one of our writer's block strategies, is that I encourage my students to share their doc with friends in the class or friends in other classes they could also share. And so if they want to during writing time, it's okay for them to exchange docs and to give each other feedback because obviously that's really critical to their process and really helps with moving them forward when they get stuck with their writing. Heather, do you see anything on the questions that you want to tackle?
I saw something about struggling. How do you encourage students who love to write but get discouraged by their spelling and grammar mistakes? And I know that we did mention, voice typing in Google. And so that way they don't have to worry about spelling or anything. Another strategy, and it's, I guess the amount of writing my students are doing is a little less, but I also have started to incorporate Siri in, and because I can't, my students will be like, how do you spell this? How do you spell this? And they'll be yelling at me, and then I'm working with somebody else. And so I've actually started having them use their iPads and ask Siri to spell things for them because a lot of them get so frustrated that they don't know how to spell and it just stops them right there. And so Siri is something that helps.
I should also mention that NaNoWriMo encourages writers at the beginning to silence their inner editor and to recognize that this is a rough draft. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's rough, but you can't polish something unless you have something rough first. But here's what I've learned. I do not tell my 8th graders about the inner editor to silence it because they don't have one. They don't have an inner editor. And so if I tell them to silence it, then it all falls apart. But once in a while I have kids who are really perfectionists and I don't want them to stress over that. So we do talk about that. Chris, it looks like we have a question for you about, are there books like No Plot, No Problem that are kid friendly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ideally, Laura, you had mentioned the Young Writers Program workbooks, and we do have those kind of mapped to all different age levels. And we hope that those kind of provide a little bit of that sense of we're on this preparation journey together. But I think there isn't a great, clear book that will kind of take you through the journey of both prepping and then doing it. I do know, however, and I would love to hear Laura and Heather's take on this too, that the NaNoWriMo Young Writers Program actually, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be talking about this, there will be a book authored by the NaNoWriMo Young Writers Program whose goal is to do this. And this book will be coming out into the world. I need to get my publication date straight, but there may not currently be, but there will be a resource. And I'm gonna now stop talking and say, Laura, Heather, what do you guys recommend?
So yeah, the workbook and the curriculum for the program are extremely valuable resources. As far as I have resources in my classroom that I haven't used in years that are books written for kids who want to write. I feel like more valuable for kids are these smaller chunks, these mini lessons and these things that come out of the NaNoWriMo curriculum. I don't encounter too many 8th graders who want to sit down with a whole book on how to improve their writing, but most of them do want little lessons. And I know that this is in the resource doc for teachers out there who are looking to tackle this, but I have been doing this for 8 years, and I've got a website dedicated to it, and I blog about it. And so I have lots of different resources there that would probably be helpful for teachers who are trying to figure out how we would make this happen. So let's see. Chris, they want to know if you have any words of encouragement for teachers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I think what I would say to teachers, one of the most inspiring things I think for kids who are becoming young writers and starting to see themselves as writers is to look to their teachers and see their teachers also making a commitment to their own creativity. There are no more overworked people than teachers. I'm married to a middle school teacher. You know, she works evenings, weekends. I mean, it's an all-consuming job. And I think because of that, it's easy to take our own imagination and our own creative ideas and our own dreams and kind of back burner those, because you're obviously there with kids who have such great needs, and it's so hard to put your needs on that same level. But I think one of the things that can be so fun about National Novel Writing Month is when teachers are writing alongside their kids, and the kids can check in and say, you know, what did you love today? What sucked for you today? What's your character doing today? And I think that it gives teachers who really need a clear kind of excuse to create and to dream again. It gives you that chance to do that. And I think it does it in such a powerful, helpful way that kind of connects your creative journey with that of your students. So I think the overall message here, and my own bit of encouragement, is just like, teachers, like, the world needs your novels too. Like, you more than anybody else deserve the time to write, to dream, to make. And so if you can make National Novel Writing Month kind of something that both helps your students, but also gives you a chance to take part in it, I would really encourage it.
That is such a perfect way to wrap up. So we're just about out of time. So I just want to say thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. Thank you to our audience out there for joining us. Heather, thank you so much. Anything you want to add?
I just have always thought of writing as, you know, the most difficult thing for my students, but now with all the technology supports and the ways to assist, and listening to this inspiring from you, that it no longer is such a daunting task. And so I'm really excited to get started in November.
That's great. I tell my kids that my class is one of the only ones that gives them a blank piece of paper and tells them to make something new every day. The other classes, they're given the information. So
Right.
it is hard, but it's also a chance for them to be creative, which I think is so powerful to them. So thanks to everybody for participating today. And our hope for you is that you've been inspired to let your students write the stories that really matter to them, and also to find mentor texts that will inspire them. Please join us next week on October 25th for our second episode in the Love of Lit series, which is entitled Including All Readers. And thanks again, Chris and Heather and PBS, and we hope you have a great night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.